So good morning to everybody. The session is recorded. During the course of the TWIN4MERIT project, we are at the 4th webinar in a series of 6 webinars. And today we have Professor Alexia Panayiotou from the University of Cyprus with us for a presentation titled, "Is Merit Truly Meritocratic?" I will give the floor to the TWIN4MERIT coordinator, Dr. Marios Dimitriadis, for a short presentation before Alexia's webinar.
Thank you, Pavlos. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, especially as we are approaching the completion of the project. We are really proud that the research outputs of the project are presented by the colleagues that have been involved, and Professor Alexia Panayiotou, together with Dr. Kyriaki Koura, were one of the core research teams that contributed vastly to the project and to its success. And we're really happy today to share with you one of the outputs, one of the presentations that are a result of the project, with Professor Panayiotou presenting whether merit is truly meritocratic. This is within the framework of a broader effort of this great research team to carry out research in the area of the gender in research assessment and certain biases that occur within this framework. So I will not talk any further. I will leave the floor to the experts. I will give the floor to Professor Alexia Panayiotou to deliver the webinar. Professor Panayiotou, thank you again so much for being here with us today. Looking forward to listening to your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pavlo, Maria. It's a delight to be here, and I apologize for the delay and the by now very expected technical problems that I will encounter whenever something is important to me. I feel like sometimes I just bring it upon myself because I worry so much that technology will not work, and it doesn't work. That is called the self-fulfilling prophecy, by the way. In any case, here we are. Thank you for your patience. I realized that under a project titled TWIN4MERIT, to be ending with a webinar with the title, "Is Merit Truly Meritocratic?" almost sounds controversial, right? Well, let's delve into that. And perhaps it is not as controversial as it sounds, because I think one of the final propositions of the work that we have been doing for the last 3 years under TWIN4MERIT is that indeed there are different ways than the established ones to discuss merit and to evaluate merit. So, fortunately, the technical issues remain because I don't think you can see me changing slides, correct?
That's correct.
Sorry.
Try with your keyboard arrow. So now you have to share again. Go to the share link again. Share window and find the PowerPoint presentation.
I'm very sorry. You can see it?
We can see it. Just press the slideshow button on the right bottom
let's
corner.
Try this. All right. So, of course, meritocracy is a very established notion, not just in our universities, but widely in our societies as well. Very brief definition is that it's a system in which advancement and rewards are based on individual merit, such as talent, effort, achievement, rather than factors like social status or wealth. We tend to believe in a meritocratic society that individuals gain success and recognition primarily through our abilities and hard work. And of course, for all this, we credit Plato a very, very long time ago in his seminal work, The Republic. Now, for today, and in 2025, Kiriaki and I, in our common project, are asking, is it really so? Or is meritocracy in the end more of a myth? What do we mean by myth? Well, it's a widely held belief, but actually it's not necessarily so in reality. So the false narrative that everyone has an equal chance at social mobility if we simply work hard enough. Now, I wanted to just share this slide very, very quickly, because it's a widely held assumption in education, not just in higher education. If you see the bottom part of this slide, that our intelligence, our IQ score, determines how long we stay in education. So I'm very smart. I finished high school, of course, I get a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, a postdoc. And how long I stay in education, all of my degrees, determine my future and, of course, my social class. But what happens in reality? Well, it's probably the exact reverse. Where I come from, my social class, my background, the wealth of my parents, determines how long I stay in education. And guess what? That actually determines my IQ score. Possibly increases it substantially because of this exposure and this background. Exactly the reverse of what we tend to believe. Actually, as I was preparing for this presentation, I was looking at my social media and I saw this post of a very dear colleague, Vespo Fatacasinos, who is currently in Colombia and Peru. And I'm going to read her post to you because I thought it so accurately represents what we're talking about today. And I wrote to Vespo and I said, please, when you come back, we really need to talk about this. She is among a group of very gifted students in Panama at the moment. And one of these gifted students, she writes, actually posed the following question to her. Does she think, as a very established researcher and scholar herself, that in today's world, it is possible for any substantial scientific work or breakthrough to come out of countries like these students' own, Panama, Colombia, South America? And the student continues and says, in the past, with substantially less means than we have today, this was actually more possible than it seems to him that is the situation today. And he asks, do you think that in today's world, intelligence is no longer enough? And Vespo writes herself how taken aback she was with this question. And of course, the realization that this student is truly correct. It is extremely difficult for scientists, aspiring scientists in South America or other countries of the world for that matter, other than Northern Europe, Northern America, possibly to some extent Asia recently, to advance their ideas. And she writes, this is a huge loss, not just for the people involved, but for all of us, for our societies and our economies. How fitting for today's presentation, right? This is one of my favorite cartoons. Some of you that have heard me present on other occasions, I tend to use this a lot because I find it so accurate. Are we really treating everyone fairly? in today's higher education, because this is our focus with Kyriaki. Does meritocracy actually exist? Look at this evaluator here. He's sitting there. He's assuming that he's being completely objective because the test that he is giving to all these participants that you see is, please climb that tree. He believes this is a fair selection. It's a meritocratic selection, right? Well, okay, look at this cartoon again. Possibly not. In our work, we've also relied a lot on the book that you see here, brilliant book, highly recommended by Michael Sandel of Harvard University, The Tyranny of Merit, What's Become of the Common Good, Michael Sandel asks. And in this book, he says that a meritocratic system, even if perfectly fair, actually leads to a toxic society and several erroneous beliefs. It leads to hubris, humiliation, demoralization, and the lack of solidarity. Last night, actually, I stayed up very late and I watched a webinar by Professor Sandel. I couldn't miss it, especially in light of our today's presentation. His title was, Does Meritocracy Undermine Democracy? And of course, you can guess his answer is yes, it does. I really wanted to share with you, even though I added these slides last minute, last night at 2 a.m. after his webinar, but I felt it's absolutely crucial that I share this information today. Here are some key points. First of all, he says, and although he's talking about the United States, I think his conclusions hold for the entire world, even if the numbers may be a little bit different. So public confidence, he says, in higher education is continuously plummeting. In fact, 7/10 of Americans feel that higher education is going in the wrong direction. I know that for our purposes, recently, Stockwatch published how the public in Cyprus still retains their confidence in public universities, especially the University of Cyprus. For me, that makes me very happy and very proud. But generally speaking, there is a trend where faith in higher education is going down and down. In this context, in higher education, meritocracy is still alive and well. It's a very attractive ideal, but Sandel says it's actually undermining democracy for several reasons. One, meritocracy seems to be categorizing people into winners and losers. All right, this is the American perspective, but taken again more widely, it's this idea that we are divided amongst ourselves to think that those of us who are successful, to use the American term of winner, very, very widely used in American discourse, again, we are made to believe that our success is our own doing. It's because I worked really hard. It's because I'm very intelligent. It's because I had all these top publications. I will come back to this. The reverse, of course, is really demoralizing, because it's one thing for me to think that I succeeded based on my own hard work, but it's really demoralizing if I think that I failed precisely because I am not intelligent, I did not work hard enough, I did not go to X university, I did not get that publication. This is the part where Sandel says that this erroneous belief and this categorization is really creating toxic societies today. Furthermore, this belief in individual success is a type of hubris from the Greek word ivris, playing with the gods and good fortune. Now, these beliefs create a certain pattern of privilege and a hierarchy of esteem. So in the end, this sorting function, who is worthy, who is a true scholar, who is excellent, becomes more important than the educational function. Why are we here? What is our goal? What is our role? And in the end, it seems that meritocracy has a dark side. It's, in fact, corrosive for the public good, he says, and argues that we must shift the discourse away from these perceptions to affirm the dignity of work for everyone. Now, he talks more widely. Last night, he was talking about the dignity of plumbers and electricians, people who do not need a university education. But for the purposes of our talk today and focusing on academia specifically, I still rely on this term, the dignity of work, because there are different types of work that we're doing in academia beyond just publishing in the so-called A journals. I've shown this photo before, those of you who have heard me in other presentations related to TWIN4MERIT. I like to show it, however, because I want to show how deeply ingrained this idea of greatness, excellence, very much related to the myth of meritocracy is in higher education, including our very own faculty here, the School of Economics and Management. Excellence is defined in academia in very, very narrow and specific terms. You see some of these ways here. We think of excellent scholars as those who publish in certain journals. You see the Financial Times list here, for example. Journals that have high impact factors. I'm an associate editor in several journals right now, striving for some of them to increase the journal impact factor. Not all of them, because we are starting a new journal. I should also mention this, Feminist Organization Studies, specifically moving away from these perspectives. Tamara, another journal that I'm very much involved with, an associate editor, we are trying to change this rhetoric. I will return to this in the end. Look at the Times Higher Education rankings. All universities strive to be part of that, and we celebrate when we actually increase our position. The Chartered Association of Business Schools, Kyriaki especially, has done significant work on their role in higher education, in defining what acceptable journals are and unacceptable journals, and the consequences of all these categorizations. In our own strategic plan, this is how excellence is defined. Very, very specific. Specific journals, numbers of citations, etc., etc. But what happens when we rely on these metrics, from journal lists and rankings to impact factors and citation indices, to define excellence, when their gendered construction remains hidden? So now I turn to the part that is specifically the focus of our work in TWIN4MERIT, and that is gender. Of course, whatever I am discussing here will actually hold true for social class, for race, for ethnicity, but for the purposes of our project and our own research interests, we are focusing on gender specifically. And this is where what I would like to turn to now. I begin with the work of a very dear colleague, Nana McMeyer. I will talk about her webinar as well in a minute. This is a Danish book. I purposely left the Danish cover here. So the work of McMeyer and her colleague, Margarita Järvingen. And I begin with this slide because in her work, Nana asks of her Danish colleagues, can you name 3 examples of Danish social scientists whom you consider excellent or top researchers? The results she received were actually fascinating. And I have a psychology background, for those of you who don't know, so I'm always very, very interested in people's instinctual reactions. What happens, like, what's the first thing that comes out of our mouth? Because that is how we think, right? It's very indicative of our perceptions, our ideologies, the way we see the world. Of all the male participants in her study, 2/3 mentioned only male researchers. It's a very interesting question, actually, to do it for ourselves as well. It's hurtful in a way to realize that we may also be falling into this trap, but unless we recognize all these patterns, there is no way to change them, right? So that is the first step, as hurtful as it may be. Interestingly, 1/5 of female participants did the same. So it's not just men who think of men, but also women, because we are, after all, socialized in the same society, right? Only 7 of her participants mentioned exclusively female researchers, 1 man and 6 women. Another point worth mentioning, a few men mentioned themselves. Interesting, right? And that men typically mentioned other men with similar profiles of their own. So this is just to get our discussion going here. Again and again in our study, what Kyriaki and I found is that this notion of excellence that we hold so dear, deeply intertwined with the idea of merit, is highly gendered. You see some of these seminal publications that have come out in recent years. There's blog coverage also. You see here, this is more popular writings and Times, etc. Something very much related to the book I just mentioned. Look at this article that just came up. Expectations of brilliance underlie gender distributions across academic disciplines. Additional research that points to this idea that when we think of excellence or brilliance or intelligence, it's mostly male researchers who come to mind. It seems then that we're faced with a problematic reality: the gendered construction of excellence. In fact, these gender differences among academics' careers surface very early on and have an impact on how work is cited in the future. Women are less likely to be published in high-impact journals, and even when they are, their research is less likely to be cited by others. I will be discussing some of the mechanics and the reasons for this in a minute. We are noticing that there's reviewer and editorial bias, including the fact that less women are asked to review, as well as lower acceptance rates. There's funding bias. Analysis revealed that female applicants received lower scores compared to male applicants, even when the quality of their proposed projects was comparable. The Matilda effect in science. In case people don't know, this is the effect where men tend to be credited for work that either women do or women also do. Yeah. The case of the helix, for example, the DNA helix, is a very well-known case in science. There's even theatrical plays that are coming out now trying to reinstate what actually happened, that it's not just Watson and Crick who should be credited with the double helix. We also see from research that male names are more likely to be cited than women. And overall, in these citations, we see a tendency of papers with first male authors, not just to be cited more, but also to be more self-promoting. In regards to self-citations, in other words, men tend to do this more than women. Now, when we're counting citations, it's not like we're looking at how many of these are self-citations or not. And of course, there's other biases beyond just blatantly gender. So men cited more, women cited less. Beyond that, this very interesting piece that came out in Organization shows that, especially in management journals, in top management journals, the skewed few that tend to get published in these are the same few. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's like a self-perpetuating cycle. It's like if you have one credit card, you're more likely to get another credit card. The problem is getting that first credit card because then one bank has trusted you to give you that credit card. It's kind of the same in these top journals. If you have one publication in a top journal, it's like getting a credit card. It becomes way more likely to get published in it again and again. Now, of course, one could argue here, yes, but doesn't that mean that this person is doing just absolutely stellar work? Well, okay, let's return to this question in a minute. If the same few are getting published again and again in the same journals, perhaps that should raise some flags for us and some questions. Let's begin to answer some of these questions. One, what we are noticing is that there is a hierarchy between research fields. We see this hierarchy documented in several studies. I am referring to two here. One of them is by the authors I just mentioned, Järvingen and Mick-Meyer. And they note, interestingly, that research fields that are dominated by men are attributed higher status and are actually considered more generalist within a discipline than those fields that are dominated by women, where we see the reverse. Those fields are seen as lower status and considered specialist. Why do we care about this? Well, we care because the so-called top journals in the lists that we saw earlier, the FT, the Charter Association of Business Schools list, they tend to publish more generalist work. So what ends up happening? Well, it seems like these knowledge hierarchies result in a skewed publication arena as well. What I'm showing here from our colleague Matthias Nilsson. Matthias was here last year and presented in a TWIN4MERIT conference as well. And his colleague Bergeson, apologies if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly. So look at what they document in research policy in the field of management and organization studies especially. Now, there is a direct comparison here between male-dominated topics and the topic's presence in one of these journal lists, the journal lists that academics should and do aspire to publish in because they're very prestigious, because basically they get you tenure, they get you professorship, they get you funding, they get you all kinds of different benefits. Look at the top topics, those in blue. Those are male typical topics. Dynamic capabilities, inventory management, online market, operations, algorithms. And look at the bottom where you start to see a lot more red, the female typical topics. Now, those are the topics like commitment or CSR or healthcare management that are far less likely to be published in these top journals. So our colleagues here conclude that knowledge hierarchies and epistemic imbalances are an integral part of what makes up the gender system of inequality in the social sciences. And then in funding, these knowledge hierarchies are directly related to social science funding. And you see, again, the proportion of men and women, the funding rates by gender, on the right-hand side of this slide. Now, Matthias' summary at the conference last year was that social sciences should not just control away disciplinary and epistemic differences to get closer to the true effect of gender on academic hiring, publishing, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, he said, thematic, methodological, and theoretical orientations should also be interrogated as possible mechanisms through which gender inequalities are reproduced. And some additional facts to take into account. Care work in academia, completely undervalued. What is care work? Well, relational work or glue work or mom work, as you see it referred here in several studies. It's taking care of students, addressing their problems, getting on committees, including, by the way, equality and diversity committees. Yep. So we're talking about equality work, also be done primarily by female academics. Who does this type of work? Mick Meyer, in the webinar that I referred to earlier, absolutely wonderful as well. I watched this last month, titled Gender and Career in Academia. And you see the accompanying article here on the right, again, with the same co-author, Margareta Järvingen from the University of Copenhagen. What do these colleagues find? Well, that women do a lot more of this care work, service work, such as the examples that you see here, including planning of conferences, workshops, taking care of early career researchers, mentoring them. And these are some of the numbers that she showed in the webinar, also shown in the article that I shared. Overwhelmingly, high service work falls on women professors. The second number is not male professors, it's actually women associate professors. Now, I find these numbers very, very interesting. We can come to these again later on. And how about teaching conditions? Mick Meyer talks about this as well. Very interesting book that you see on the right as well about gendered academic citizenship. Teaching women tend to over-prepare compared to our male colleagues. Men tend to approach teaching more strategically. And in fact, we also see this authority gap. What does this mean? Well, our perceptions around who is an authority in a certain subject in order to teach it, again, as you may suspect, is skewed in favor of male colleagues. Why do we care about this? Well, if all we value in academia is research and publications, then the service work that I just mentioned and teaching definitely fall by the wayside, and in fact are detrimental to someone's promotion and evaluation, because the motto overwhelmingly in today's academia is research, publish, publish, publish. Never mind about anything else. One more very, very interesting finding, and this relates to networking. Think of the publication rates, the skewed few in the prestigious journals that I mentioned earlier, and our inclination to think, oh, well, they're the brightest, they're the best. Is it indeed so? Okay, I'm not doubting that these scholars are highly accomplished, highly intelligent, et cetera, but I'm saying very much along the lines of Michael Sandel, let's look at what else may be going on. It is important for our universities, it's important for society. It seems then that male academics, especially male associate professors, work very strategically to increase their chances of publishing in the so-called top journals. How do they do this? Well, through very strategic efforts. For example, they are very likely to go to specific conferences, to approach specific people. I don't need to tell you that these are other accomplished male professors, to have a coffee with them, to ask them to read their paper, to ask them even to co-author with them. So men build social capital through strategic network. This is what the study that I just showed indicates. Male associate professors, McMyer says, have published 50 articles in their department's top journals in the Danish university she studied, while female associate professors published far less. Interestingly, again, over 80% of the men's articles were co-authored with other men. Only 4 of the women's articles of these 26 that you see here were authored by women alone, while just over half were co-authored again with men. And I think we can start thinking about the fact that, all right, well, is it indeed just as likely in our societies today for female academics to go to conferences, to approach these top male academics, have coffees, have beers, yeah, ask them to work together? Okay. Again, something for our discussion, if you will. And then lastly, a word on so-called gaming strategies. Now, Sandel takes the perspective that gaming is ruining academia today, perspective also taken in this journal publication in sociology that you see here. What are these gaming strategies? Well, they take many, many forms. Let me just refer to a couple. Adapting research to what one believes are journal preferences, and being strategic so far as actually going back. I know colleagues are doing this, going back 5 years, looking at the specific subjects that are being published in journals, and changing one's career trajectory, research path to fit those preferences. But then the question is, what happens to new paths? What happens to creating cutting-edge thinking? What happens to pushing the knowledge boundary? Gaming strategies, of course, involve collaborating with top researchers, putting a name down on your paper specifically so that you can get published. Quantitative work over qualitative work takes you much further. We know this. I know this the hard way because I do qualitative work. And then having a tunnel vision on metrics. Is this likely to be cited? Is this likely to increase my age index? Of course, gaming is a natural consequence of today's performance management. Performance measurement systems. Oh, okay, performance management as well. Slip of the tongue, but very correct as well. Few last words. The motherhood penalty. We can't undervalue this. So if I take us away now for a minute, away from academia to what is happening in the rest of people's lives, what we see here is that on the left, you see what happens when women have children and when men have children. Basically, no real effect on earnings, whereas for women, very, very clear effect. We know from many, many sources that women carry out at least 2.5 times more unpaid household and care work than men. I'm abstracting again. This is not just academia, although this trend transfers to academia, as we just saw. But if women, including women in academia, have these care responsibilities, not just their students, but also their children, their elderly parents, their home, what is the end result? Well, many less publications, very indicative of what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. A study on nearly 2,500 Elsevier journals, you see the gender gap in journal submissions and peer review during that first wave when we were all locked in our homes. It worked brilliantly for a lot of our male colleagues, not so for our female colleagues. So is there merit in meritocracy? Well, bad news, it seems that in every step of the evaluation process, we have gender effects. In fact, these gender effects, and I think it's worth stressing this, is not so much because of conscious discrimination. We're no longer talking about this first wave of discrimination like the 60s, 70s, perhaps even 80s, but where women were clearly discriminated against, not hired because they're women, but due to these implicit biases, some of them quite complex to figure out, like the knowledge hierarchies that I have been referring to. Of course, as mentioned, these patterns do not just hold for women, but also faculty of color and other underrepresented groups as well. Vandenbrink and Benship have a brilliant article that I keep coming back to, where they liken the gender practices and the construction of academic excellence as a sheep with 5 legs. Now, I understand this is a Dutch saying. Basically, what they want to say is that we are so far from meritocracy in academia. This ideal academic is constructed in such a specific way that it really keeps female academics out. Let me end, however, with some good news, because there are ways forward. And this also forms bulk of the work that Kyriaki and I have been doing these last few years. I wanted to share with you some of my, let's say, go-to books and articles. The Good University by Rowan Connell, The University of Hope by Monica Costera. I actually did a review of this book because I absolutely loved it. I have a review in Organization Studies about this because there is a lot of hope in this book. And for me, as an academic, as an idealistic academic, one could say this is crucial. A series coming out now on doing academic careers differently. Colleagues and I are contributing an edited volume to this series, actually focusing on doing teaching differently. Lots of interesting suggestions in this entire series and in the specific book that you see here. And a wonderful article by Carl Rhodes and Alison Pellin, The Good Business School, abstracting from the books that I just mentioned and focusing very specifically on the business school, where I'm located. Let me be more specific, however. So those are for inspiration, but I want to end with 2 very specific suggestions. One from the work of Dirk Lindebaum and Paul Hubert, just came out 2024. These colleagues urging us to move to meaningfulness, since in the end, they say, evaluation is a social practice. They too contest the notion of excellence and merit. In fact, they say we end up playing to the measure of excellence and not to its content. The current tools have emptied the contents of excellence, in fact, and they urge us to focus on a collaborative approach of researchers and communities, and to always ask ourselves the question, as researchers, whom is this meaningful for? If it's for the editors and the reviewers, well, they say, then we're simply perpetuating all the toxicity that these myths have brought upon academia and the world. Focus on our intended audience. Yeah, a journal will sometimes say, okay, what are the practical implications? But they say we need to go beyond that. We need to look at the impact intentional after publication. Let's start to reward diverse forms of research contribution. Let's look at the teachability of what we are saying in our work. And overall, let's move away from this discourse of, oh, I made it into an A journal, to my research has made a real difference in practice. Again, let's move towards something that is more meaningful. And my last article for today, Lageson and Suboticki, again, 2024, they too note that excellence has become this empty signifier that must be filled with meaning, arguing something very similar in other words. They urge us to think of academic evaluations, to acknowledge them as imperfect, with substantial subjective and idiosyncratic features, but also to ask the question of what are the consequences? Is this the type of academia that we want to be constructing? This narrow definition of excellence and merit that we have inherited and perpetuating, what is this leading us to? And actually, I find their proposition so refreshing to build more excellent collectives or collective excellence rather than focus on individual merit, to move away from the prima donnas, like, the star football players of academia, the star scholars, to a focus on a responsibility, a collective responsibility for our departments. Focus on who is best suited for our department, not the so-called best or most excellent candidate, this lone rider, this prima donna or individual. Understand that we're working within collectives and redefine excellence in this collective rather than individualistic way. Hopefully, I have ended with some possibilities and some good news for today. Thank you. And Kyriaki and I are here to listen to any questions and hopefully address them in a discussion.
Thank you, dear Alexia, for this wonderful presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Please let me know so I can allow them to open their microphones. Just raise your hand.
Pablo, can I start?
Yes.
Alexia, thank you again for this very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. But actually, I was a bit, shocked, may I say, by the very representative figure that you showed with the topics that are prioritized by journals, and I tried to read them very quickly, and it actually the pieces of the puzzle were put into place. And I must say I didn't know that this was another indicator of let's say masculinity vs femininity kind of topics and how these are prioritized. So thank you for this amazing insight. I would really like to elaborate with you research-wise at some point, because this is, the implications for this and the room for further research are amazing. So, Alexia, as you said, and I completely agree that excellence is some sort of a, let's say, hollow at this point concept, something that is, it's not something that immediately represents what you would expect to hear as the impact of research, and we completely agree with that. I want to ask you regarding something that is one of the main concerns that I have. How do we change things in terms of revisiting the term excellence, and how do we fuel our policies here at the University of Cyprus, but also in Cyprus as a whole, with meaningful representations of excellence. For example, I had carried out a review of all our research evaluation processes, and I examined specifically where we measure and we mention societal impact and open science. These were the things that were of my interest at the point due to the Quara, let's say, context. And societal impact is only mentioned in the annual review of the research activities, only to a very small percent, together with open science at a 10% miscellaneous index, and in the research units whereby the societal impact was some sort of a prerequisite for allowing their establishment. How can we bring change, Alexia? How do we bring these concepts within the actual policies of the university? This is something that I'm really concerned about, because I've been present in many discussions, both in the research committee, the Senate, during my term there. How do we change things? What do you think is the way forward?
That is a really good and very difficult question, Maria. And it's one that Kyriaki and I have been really struggling with. This is our other paper, yeah? It's titled From Metrics to Meaning. Kyriaki took the lead. Why responsible research assessment has yet to become the new norm. And what we are arguing in this, and we're very, very grateful to TWIN4MERIT that has given us this space for the last few years to really delve deeply into these questions, the one that you just posed, and to see findings like the one that you also mentioned, Maria, which, yes, was a surprise for us as well. So through this process, I think we have learned a whole lot. So I think we need another webinar to answer the question, but hopefully people will get a chance to read our paper, and hopefully it will also be published soon. Because Kyriaki and I, again, we call, like these authors, a move to a more responsible research assessment. And I know there's all the efforts. Quara, the university, has taken the lead on Quara. There's Dora, there's the Leiden Manifesto. Kyriaki knows these much better than I. And yet they're failing to become the new norm, which I think is basically what you're also saying, Maria. Very, very briefly, I think it comes down to individual evaluations, individual faculty evaluations. And we're stuck in a paradox here at the university, a paradox that actually we are currently facing. On the one hand, we believe in open science. We have signed Quara and open science. Kyriaki and I are very big proponents. It's the way of the future. But at the same time, especially early career academics are stuck worrying if these publications will indeed count for getting a job, for getting tenure, in the same way that there is a very dominant rhetoric of where to publish, what to publish, how to publish, completely dismissing impact, teaching, social input, relevance. We say that we care about these, but when it comes down to an individual's evaluation, they are just simply add-ons. Yeah, so we're like, oh, okay. And how is her teaching evaluation? It's not so great. Well, it doesn't matter. We can always make up because she has all these top publications in the top journal. Then it's usually a he, not even a she. So in the University of Cyprus, unless we start talking to each other and really be in agreement as to what we're doing, we will continue to be doing two different things. The university, its administration, will be signing Quora and urging us for open science, and some of us will believe in it. But then when it comes down to our evaluations, we'll be paying dearly for it, because our committees will simply be looking at these journal lists and the age indices. It's not easy for universities. I mean, a lot of scholars throughout the world are saying this. For universities much bigger, much, way older than ours, it's not easy, because we seek to be established through our rankings. Our rankings are determined by all the things I pointed to, things we disagree with. So what are we doing? We want to be established. We disagree with the way of being established, but we need to be established in order to get more funding, it's like it becomes a chicken and egg dilemma. And it's for us, I think, to start talking amongst ourselves. We're not Sorbonne to say, forget all those lists, we don't care. I'm a realist in that sense. But I would like to believe that there are other ways, like a collective perception of excellence, like the article I just ended with, not an individual perspective, I think is quite doable in the university. In other words, it's not just about Alexia becoming a professor, it's Alexia's department. How do I build a strong department? How do I build a strong business school? It's beyond Alexia's 3 publications. It takes a lot more than that. I hope somewhat it answers the question. I forgot to mention in closing that, I started off with a question, how can we be talking about merit in TWIN4MERIT? It's kind of tongue in cheek. Actually, I think that this is exactly the work that should be coming out of our project. And I feel incredibly proud that Kyriaki and I managed to do this. And I'm acknowledging this because this is not necessarily what we thought we would be doing at the beginning of this project. It's just that our research took us in this way. And really, it's been a tremendous learning process. Thank you again to our funders and to those of you who contributed to us getting the project in the first place.
Thank you, Alexia, for your very complete answer. I forgot to mention before that when I was looking at the open science and societal impact, I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that we didn't have any explicit requirements in terms of quantitative indicators, lists, etc. But then I remembered that the implicit bias that you just mentioned is there, even if you don't list that we want 5 publications in top journals, which is what they say. They still look for it. I mean, this is what they're looking. As you said, if they have, forget about teaching, forget about evaluation, forget about all the other complementary things. They have the research, they have the top journals. Let's hire them, let's promote them. So this is the most difficult part. I mean, societal impact open science, I may amend the regulations and put them in, but still, if the committees will be implicitly biased and keep looking for these things, then this is the key problem. So again, Alexa, thank you very much for the great insights. I think we all thank both of you for the great work that you have done. It's been really a privilege to have you on the project. And what you said was great. Actually, you started from somewhere else and you ended up. This is the beauty of research, right? You go, you investigate a topic, and then you move to the direction that your findings take you. And this is exactly what the point is. This is what we're trying to explain to the funding agencies, that at the research journey, you start from one point. Don't expect to do as you do with other investments. This is investment in human capital. You don't expect to invest in research as you invest in buildings and other things. You invest in something that has uncertainty, but this is the beauty, that you may end up in findings that are not what you expected, but maybe the way forward. So really looking forward to reading your publications. We're more than happy at some point to read them and provide you with my, let's say, policy aspects of the topic. This is what I believe would be useful from my side. Do we have any other questions from the colleagues that are participating?
If Kyriaki wants to add anything as well, I also wanted to put in another pitch and say how incredibly important it was to have an interdisciplinary team. Kyriaki comes from a different background than I, and I think that really made for much more interesting work. So it's good to keep that in mind for future projects, combining different disciplines. I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, just to also thank the project and Alexia, you, for everything that we learned together under this project. But, yeah.
Well, thank you both. The great thing is that we're continuing together from January onwards in our other project, whereby we will look into gender in the directions that you want under the umbrella of sustainable development this time, but still gender is such an influential research area that should be given the attention that it deserves. So we're really glad that we'll have you on board in this new undertaking, and more great things to come within this project and the new project. We may be able to actually transform things, produce change, especially with your influential research and the suggestions that will come from this research. So that's it from me. Again, thank you very much. Any concluding remarks from your side, Alexia and Kyriaki?
Well, I think what brings us all together is the belief in change. And I want to remain hopeful. So we're doing work in that direction. Perhaps what we need to do more is lobby for it, not just study and research and present. But that's for down the line. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. All the best to everybody. Have a nice weekend.
Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.